It's the 1970s in the Bronx, New York, and something is really starting to take form. No one's quite sure what it is yet, but it's influenced by the streets, discos, and house parties, and it's the coolest form of expression that you can imagine. And by the 80s, we have hip-hop, an art form that is now spread outside of New York and is in its golden era. And even though it's hard to define, it's characterized by diversity, quality, and innovation. And there are a lot of people who've come in the past who were very controversial, but continue to play a significant role and were seen as its influences. In 1993, Bad Boy Records was formed, and in 5 years, the label was estimated to be worth over $100 million due to artists such as Notorious Big and M.A.A.D, who were leading the movement towards a rap subgenre that was influenced by debauchery and celebration. But not everyone was happy about them leading what was then seen as the modern style of hip-hop. People criticized them for taking hip-hop and watering it down to make it appeal to the masses, and the label was criticized for putting hip-hop in the danger of losing its authenticity. And then in the early 2000s, we had Kanye West, who came in when hip-hop was seen as a form of expression from the point of view of individuals that came from tough backgrounds and went through hardships, and they themselves had become tough because of that environment. But Kanye West was a very nerdy person whose parents were both highly educated. His debut album, College Dropout, had the themes of self-consciousness, materialism, and higher education. It was about how difficult it was for him to drop out of college and pursue his dream of being a rapper. But not only was Kanye West fully embraced by hip-hop, he was seen as the person that was taking it forward. And many A-list rappers have found themselves at the center of discussion because they were different, whether it be because of their racial background, their country of origin, and even because of the way that they're dressed. But at the end of the day, none of that mattered. They were treated with respect and seen as hip-hop artists in their own right. So hip-hop has had many changes over the years, but it was thriving. Its gatekeepers were happy, its consumers were happy, it was all good until now. In the late 2010s, it became apparent that hip-hop needed a new leader to take it forward, and two rappers came forward. Drake.
It's the competitive thing, and it's also just like, I'm probably one of the few people that really lives this rap life. Like, I really live this rap life for real. I'm really out here.
And Kendrick Lamar.
I got to. I didn't, come on. I'm so passionate about hip hop, man. Like, I don't know what era everybody else come from, but when I used to...
These two have released some incredible music over the years, but these two were so different that this left everyone divided as to who was the actual best rapper of this generation. But in the years between 2011 and now, many rappers have stood up against one person and said, "We don't want you to be our leader. We want you out." And what happened next is arguably the wildest story that we have seen from the music industry unfold right before our eyes. But you have to ask yourself the question, why? Should we really be sitting down and asking ourselves, like, what actually happened? Because there's not liking someone and disagreeing with their views, and then there is this.
We don't want to hear you say.
So let's take a deep dive into the series of events that led to the very public obliteration of one of the most prominent figures in the music industry. So I'm going to tell you the story right from the beginning. So to fully understand this, we need to start by going through the background of one Aubrey Drake Graham. Drake was born on the 24th of October 1986 in Toronto, Canada. Drake didn't have much growing up. His family lived in Western Road, which wasn't the best area in Toronto, but in 1997, they were able to move to Forest Hill. Drake says that his childhood was very difficult because of his biracial ethnicity, and he didn't really fit in anywhere that he went. He was either the child that hung out with black kids but was too light-skinned, or he was the child that hung out with white people but was too dark-skinned. But he said that he has always identified as a black person who was immersed immersed in black culture. And there have been some questions about that on the internet, so let's go into the story of his parents. His father, Dennis Graham, was a drummer for rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis. His uncle played bass for Sly and the Family Stone, and his grandmother actually used to babysit Aretha Franklin. His mom, Sadie, worked as a teacher and a florist. So Dennis and Sadie actually met in a bar while Dennis was performing. He said that he saw a lady that was smoking at the bar during his break, so he went up to her and he asked her if he could bum a cigarette. And not long after that, he had her smiling, they started dating, they got married, and they had Drake. The marriage didn't last very long. They actually got divorced when Drake was only 5 years old. And that was because Dennis apparently wanted to move back to America. He was from Memphis, and Sadie wanted to stay in Canada. So when they got divorced, they did exactly that. Dennis moved back to America and Sadie stayed behind, and she got full custody of Drake, so he stayed in Canada with her. And the idea was that Drake was going to spend summers with his dad in Memphis. But not long after this, Dennis managed to get himself in trouble with the law, and he was arrested for selling and being in possession of illegal substances. So this was a very big deal because Drake now didn't have a male figure. I mean, he still spoke to his dad on the phone, but it wasn't the same. So Drake had a primarily Jewish upbringing, with his mother's side of the family being his primary caregivers. He even remembers having a bar mitzvah in an Italian restaurant, which doesn't sound like a very black upbringing. But Dennis did finally manage to get out of prison, but he was struggling to make ends meet. So even then, he couldn't afford to make child support payments, and he wouldn't be allowed to see Drake. But then he managed to turn his life around, and he would make sure that Drake would spend summers with him. And this would bring out Drake's musical roots. Drake was spending a lot of time watching his father record in the studio, and he would even participate in some of the sessions and practice singing with his father. Drake took a particular shining to rapping as a child, but he very specifically remembers his dad saying to him that there aren't any rappers that can actually sing and do it well. And he's grown up with that in his mind. In 2001, at 14 years old, he landed a role as Jimmy Brooks on Degrassi Next Generation, a Canadian teen drama where he was a basketball player that gets by his classmates in the back and ends up wheelchair bound. And around about this time, he also met a girl called Keisha Shantae Harper, teen star, and who was known at the time for being a musician. So her story is quite interesting. The two met when she was 13. So Sony Music Canada signed Keisha to a long-term record contract to release her music in Canada. In early 2003, she released Shook, The Answer, a response track to Sean Desmond's track Shook, which won the Urban Music Award for Best Pop. The follow-up, Unpredictable, got to number 3 on radio charts, and her first video hit number 1 on YTV and the top 10 on Much Music. In November 2003, the CD single of Unpredictable was certified gold and later went on to win Keisha the Canadian Radio Music Award for Best New Solo Artist. So she really became successful at a very young age, and she met Drake, who was also a local celebrity, and they'd talk about everything. They were both mixed race, being thrown into this world of being celebrities in Canada at a young age. They both also used to go and spend summers with their parents. Well, in Keisha's case, it was actually her grandparents that lived in America. I believe that they lived in Georgia. And it was difficult for them because they were teen stars to actually really go out and enjoy themselves. So what they'd do is they'd spend pretty much all of their time indoors with each other. So Drake dropped out of school when he was 16 so that he could focus on acting. But during this time, he was really starting to get into rapping as well. And every day after work, he would go home and write rhymes, and he basically didn't sleep. One of his friends from the show introduced him to a rapper called Promise, who had his own record studio at home. And he was the first person to help Drake with his music by allowing him to use his studio. But at this point, his mom suffered from osteoporosis, joint pain, and arthritis, and she had to stop working and go on benefits. And the only real income they had was from Drake's acting gig. He said that this was a very difficult time because he could just remember his mom being bedridden and smoking her life away. So Drake's music career began with a group of friends that referred to themselves as the Renaissance. The singer was Melanie Fiona. D10 was on the keyboards. Alexandra was the vocalist. And Drake sang and rapped. They performed cover tracks at a restaurant in Toronto called the Avocado, which was apparently a very popular spot in Canada. So they disbanded in 2005 when he was about 19, but Drake continued to be really good friends with D10, and D10 would actually go on to introduce Drake to a friend of his who was a producer that went by the name Boy Wonder. And if you have ever heard any Drake songs, I'm sure you have heard him mention that name before. So Drake started to make a name for himself in Toronto as a rap artist, but nobody really cared. But luckily for him, he grew up in the age of social media. So this was during the time when MySpace was actually starting to become a thing. And Drake would upload his music in the hopes of reaching out to an audience outside of Canada. And one artist that he reached out to was someone called Nicholas F., who was a freestyler from Atlanta. Drake asked if they could collaborate on a track, and Nicholas F. agreed, and Drake was finally able to reach an audience outside of Canada. Now, all these guys that I've just mentioned, they all came together and they helped Drake put together a mixtape. So in 2006, he released Room for Improvement. And because of his connection with Nicholas F., he was able to partner with DJ Smalls, who was from Florida.
This the record that my backpack underground fans get to skip in.
He apparently sold about 6,000 copies, and this actually gave him quite a bit of hope. And he started looking for a manager and met a guy called Terrell Slack, an A&R manager from Louisiana who specialized in helping artists who were starting to brand themselves. Drake had a track that he knew would take his career to the next level, and they needed someone who was also a breaking artist, but someone who would really be generating a lot of buzz in America. They needed someone that could sing the hook. Slack was able to hook Drake up with Trey's songs. Trey heard the track and he liked it. He thought that Drake was very talented, and they agreed to work together. So Replacement Girl actually became a bit of a hit. So they filmed a music video for it, and the single was released under Drake's own independent record label called October's Very Own, which we now know as OVO. And this music video was picked up by television and featured on BET's 106 in Park, and Drake became the first unsigned Canadian artist to feature on the show.
Let me show you what it is. I was birthed up top, but was raised at the bottom of the map.
During the filming of this video, Drake met Noah Shabir, aka 40. 40 was also just starting his career in producing and engineering tracks for artists. He had actually worked for Drake on another track, but this was the first time that they met. Drake liked what he heard. In fact, Drake, 40, and a childhood friend of theirs called Oliver, they would become inseparable. So Drake put together another mixtape called Comeback Season, and this did really well. But the distance between Drake and his manager proved to be too difficult, and the two would actually go their separate ways. And then there was a young man called Jazz Prince. Jazz is the son of the legendary Houston music executive and one of the most respected men in the music industry, James Prince. James grew up in 5th Ward, Houston's Bloody Nickel apartments, which are known for substance use and known for being one of the most, if not the most, poverty-inflicted area in Houston. As a young man, he was exposed to a lot, but his desire to take care of his siblings and his mother overtook everything. So he had to adapt to his environment at a very young age, and he was a hustler of note. I mean, Suge Knight learned how to hustle from this guy. In 1987, he started a record label, Rap-A-Lot Records, to keep his younger stepbrother, known as the rapper Sir Rap-A-Lot, out of the street life, as well as his friends Raheem and Jukebox from skipping school. The The first group he formed was the Ghetto Boys. James found members Bushwick Bill when he was performing as a dancer at a nightclub, Willie D through the recommendation of his barber, and Scarface in the parking lot of a club he owned playing demos to a DJ who worked there. His brother, Sir Rap-A-Lot, was replaced by Scarface after a freestyle battle against each other where Scarface outperformed him. So the record label became very successful, and James became known for his mob way of doing things and his connections through the hoods. By the time he was in his late 20s, he was already a millionaire, and this brought someone wanted attention on him. James is one guy the police really wanted to put away. He was famous for accusing an FBI agent for putting a hit on him. And when that didn't work, they started planting things on him to try and put him in compromising positions where they'd be able to take him out themselves. But he just kept getting away with it, and he looked like he was exposing dirty police. The most famous case being that of the disgraced DEA agent Chad Scott. If you haven't heard of that, I will try and put a link in the description. Like, you have to read it. So anyway, one day James decided that he had had enough of this life, so he wanted to hand over the business to his offspring. So he's got 3 sons, J Prince Jr., Baby J, and Jazz Prince, the guy that just found Drake. J Prince Jr., who I think is the oldest son, was basically groomed to take over the family business. He linked up different entities from Houston to form one collective unit called Young Mafia, aka Young Mob. So this movement grew. Everybody wanted in, and it grew into the movement which we now know as Mob Ties, which is an organization that basically has reach all across the United States. Now, if you don't know who Mob Ties is, you do not want to get in the way of them and their business. A really good example of this was with the rapper 6ix9ine. So J Prince Jr. has this rule that every rapper needs to check in with him when they come to Houston. And this is a common thing, by the way. It's not even like about kissing ass or anything. It's just seen as a sign of respect. But 6ix9ine also has this rule that he does not check in with anybody anywhere that he goes. So he went to a club when he got to Houston, and he was pretty much immediately kicked out of that club. And J Prince uploaded the following post. I just want to take the time out to tell my youngest brother, Baby J Prince, that I'm proud of the way that you delivered my message to 6ix9ine when he tried to come in my party this past Sunday. You handled it swiftly but with class, and I'm proud of you for that. First off, 6ix9ine, don't think that you can go to another person's city and not show them the proper respect that's due. We've earned it and demand it. Although I might not condone in a bunch of the moves that you've made, I don't know you, and I know that you're young and new to this. So you have a lot of learning to do. So with that being said, I'm still willing to sit down with you and have a conversation with you, but not for 1 second do you get it misunderstood that you can get away with the disrespect to my city the way that you've done in others. We won't tolerate it. But then 6ix9ine decided to respond with this.
Sport, man. Like, being gangster's not cool no more. I think cloud chasing is. Mentioning Tekashi 6ix9ine's name, you lit, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna continue not to check in, you know what I'm saying? It's something I don't do. I love everything.
So J Prince Jr. went to the venue where 6ix9ine was performing. He and his entourage somehow got through the security and went on stage and did this.
Hey, what's 6ix9ine there? Hey, what's 6ix9ine there? Hey, what's 6ix9ine there? Y'all came to see 6ix9ine, huh? Where you at?
Talk a lot of shit, huh? But won't even show up to their own show. Goddamn, you don't want your back in? You don't want your back in?
So 6ix9ine didn't show his face again. If you guys are interested in it, I will put something in the sources for some pretty good interviews that the princes have done. They are usually pretty entertaining. Like, it's always really good. Nothing is off the table. So anyway, let's get back to the story. So Jazz, the brother, he calls Drake and he says, I heard your music on MySpace and I think that you're pretty talented and I'm pretty sure that I can make you famous. So Drake is just like, well, I mean, I've been told that before, but Drake also knew about Jazz and his family, so he was like, okay, well, let's give it a go. So Drake started putting music together and giving it to Jazz to sort of distribute to his high-powered friends, and he had some pretty high-powered friends. But then on the other side, the producers of Degrassi, they were not happy at all with Drake. He would stay up all night writing, producing, and promoting his music, and that meant that he'd show up the next day at work and he'd clearly be sleep deprived and just completely exhausted. So they had to give him an ultimatum. And Drake, he was just like, sorry, but I'm more passionate about music. So they had to let him go. And it was also around about this time that he and Keisha broke up. And he was forced to kind of look around and be like, well, what am I going to do now? Like, am I supposed to get a day job? Like, what's going to happen? But as luck would have it, he got the phone call. So Jazz had apparently been having a night out with a guy that at the time was holding the crown for being the best rapper in the industry, a guy that went by the name Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne had been on the throne for a while now, and he knew that one day he'd need to pass that honor on to someone else. It's just something that happens. There's a lot of debate about who had it between Biggie and Tupac, but you know, it depends on what mood you're in that day. But when they were gone, it was passed over to Jay-Z, and Jay-Z passed it on to Kanye West. Kanye West passed it on to Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne had been discovered and signed to his record label Cash Money at the age of 11, and at this point he was just about to release his 6th studio album, The Carter 3, which went on to sell over 1 million units domestically in its first week, which is insane. Like today, things like that are unheard of, which is something that we're actually going to talk about a bit later in the video. Lil Wayne was doing okay, and he just wanted to start his own label, which would be sort of a branch of Cash Money, with the goal of finding fresh artists and hopefully the future king or queen of hip-hop. So Jazz had tried to play Drake's music, but Lil Wayne was like, I don't know what this is, like, don't play it for me anymore. And then on this particular night, they were sort of like cruising in a car, and Jazz just like slipped in one of Drake's tracks in the playlist, and Wayne was like sitting there and he's like, yeah, this is cool. And Jazz was like, yeah, I told you, it's that Canadian dude. So Weezy was like, get that dude on the phone right now. So they phoned Drake, who was busy getting his hair cut, and Drake couldn't believe his ears. And Weezy was like, you know, I like your music and I would like to get you out here so that we can work together. Drake went home, he packed his things, and he left the very next day. So Lil Wayne and Drake pretty much immediately got to work. Lil Wayne had a reputation of not wanting to take any time off of making music, and this is when we got the tracks Ransom,
Drizzy Rogers or Drizzy Drake Rogers, I'm too busy to play.
Still Fly,
And I dare anybody to try.
and Forever.
I'm shutting shit down in the mall.
And Drake was invited to join Lil Wayne on the Carter 3 tour, where he would gain massive exposure. Drake has said that he just couldn't believe all the people that he had the honor to be around at this time and how quickly things were happening for him. But he just carried on grafting, and he used that moment to release his next album. So in 2009, we had So Far Gone, and this mixtape featured a lot of artists. But the song that was the most successful song in the entire album was the one where it was just Drake, best I ever had. And with this track, Drake was in the game. And I remember one of my friends just being like a really big Drake fan, and they were just like, oh my God, you know, Drake, when he sings, he had pretty much solidified himself as a real ladies' man. And with that, there was a certain amount of ridicule that came from men. I mean, look at guys like August Alsina, guys who are like real hood, but look at the way that people talk about him. It's not with the respect that someone who came from his situation and made something of himself probably deserves. I mean, he's been saying a lot of really weird things lately, but there is a certain level of disrespect that comes with being a ladies' man in the hip-hop community. But Drake was on a tour bus with Lil Wayne, for goodness sake, so he just had to kind of crack on and take the things that people were saying about him with a pinch of salt. Now, it was around about this time that Drake started getting closer with Rihanna. And Rihanna had just gotten out of a very toxic relationship with Chris Brown, obviously. But then people started spotting them out together in public, making out, and Drake just couldn't stop gushing over her in public, while Chris also seemed like he couldn't really believe that their relationship was over. So Rihanna apparently played Drake. And I remember this happening a lot over the years, actually, and I remember why this was happening. I think that Drake had a reputation of being a bit of a boy. There were a lot of girls claiming to be with Drake, and if he really wanted to be with her, I think he would have kept it in his pants. But he didn't, even when he was trying, like really, really hard. So this happened a lot. You'd see them together, he'd be gushing over her, then it's clear that the fans want them to be together and the whole industry is trying to push them together. And then you'd see them giving each other these looks and you're like, okay, it's happening, like straight after this. And then the next thing, you see her in an interview talking about how single she is, and Drake in the meantime is just out here living his best life. I mean, he dated Serena Williams in 2011 and he was showing up to her tennis matches and tweeting things like, "Serena, I cannot wait to put it on you and make you sweat during our match this weekend." Imagine her family seeing a guy talking to her like that online. So in 2012, Drake and Chris Brown, they were in New York at the same time and they ended up in the same nightclub. So they're in the VIP section on opposite sides. And I've just realized, actually, as a side note, that Chris Brown must have made a lot of money as a teen star. This dude was practically cancelled at this point. Like, there are countries even today that still don't let Chris Brown tour or get any airplay in their media. But he's never been affected by any of it financially. Like, have you ever heard of Chris Brown having to be frugal? And a good example of that is this night. So apparently Chris sent a very nice bottle of champagne to Drake's table with a note saying, "Let's be friends." So Drake allegedly ordered Chris Brown a bottle of champagne and sent it over with a note saying that, "I am fucking the love of your life." Now, I don't know when things turned to violence, but the people who were there are saying that they were seeing bottles actually just being thrown across the room. It was like crazy. Like, listen to this guy.
I look up and I see like people in the middle. I'm like, all right, it's not gonna go down because, you know what I'm saying, that's just probably people talking. Turn back and it's about to be time to go anyway. So when I turn back again, I see like somebody swing. I pulled my camera out, I started recording from there. The first, like as soon as I pressed play is when I think I caught a bottle coming by, like going this way, and then a whole bunch of bottles coming back to this way. They human, they can consume no more liquor than we could consume. So he looked as if he knew that he just made a big mistake or like he started something that he shouldn't have. He looked scared. That's one thing I can say. His facial expression was like, because it's like so many people was cut, hurt, bottles, people got hit. You know, he probably felt guilty.
And Chris Brown actually took a picture of himself, and I don't know what he was trying to do with this. So Rihanna felt like she needed to clear the air and just actually remind everybody that she is absolutely not dating Drake. But then we'd see posts of them in Toronto, clearly on what looks like is a date. And then there was a speech at the 2016 VMAs when Rihanna was being honored with the Michael Jackson Video Vanguard Award.
She's someone I've been in love with since I was 22 years old. She's one of my best friends in the world. All my adult life, I've looked up to her even though she's younger than me.
And something changed that night. Like, Drake did his usual thing to try and woo her, but Rihanna's tone was just completely different after that night. She did an interview with Vogue and she was just like, waiting through that speech was probably the most uncomfortable part. I don't like too many compliments. I don't like to be put on blast. We don't have a friendship now, but we're not enemies either. It is what it is. Sorry, I've just gone a bit off track with all this Rihanna stuff. So let's go back to the story. In 2010, Drake released Thank Me Later. And at this point, it was pretty clear that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder. His star was on the rise. And this album debuted at #1 on the Billboard and sold over 447,000 copies in its first week. This was a really strange year for Drake because Lil Wayne got arrested for charges, and this is when he decided that he needed to like really be serious about having his own record label. In August 2009, someone who went by the name XXO was posting music on YouTube, and no one had a clue who it was, but Oliver found out who it was. It was an unsigned young man who was actually a fellow Canadian, and his real name was Abel Tesfaye, but he went by the stage name The Weeknd. So Drake became somewhat of a mentor to him, adding him as an opener to his concerts. And in 2010, Drake's label posted some of his music saying, like, introducing The Weeknd. And everyone in the comments was just like completely blown away. So they were like all thanking Drake for like shining the light on this new star. So The Weeknd releases his mixtape House of Blues, and Drake is just like all over social media and he's promoting him and just like putting up posts like, follow this young kid, The Weeknd, and bring your love baby and I could bring my shame, The Weeknd, quoting The Weeknd's track Wicked Games. This mixtape was a huge success, and it had a lot to do with Drake actually promoting him. But Drake was very much giving the vibe that it wasn't just him collaborating with a friend. He was giving the vibe that this is someone that he was going to sign into his own record label, which was still very much in its foundational stages, by the way. And then we had OVOXO, which was a combined tour between OVO, which is Drake's camp, and XO, which is The Weeknd's camp. And you can pretty much say that this is The Weeknd's first taste of fame. Like, he couldn't believe what was happening in his life. Drake really got his name out in the US market, but Drake also did say that he was learning a lot from The Weeknd, saying that he was helping him with his writing and having better products. And around about this time, Drake is also working on a new album. But there is a lot going on in the background with that, and we will get back to that a little later. And then in 2011, we had the album Take Care. This became known as Drake's album, where he had really found his sound. I mean, previously, you could tell that he had a lot of influence from Lil Wayne and the Cash Money crew. It was just like really like catchy, like, but now the music just sounded like so deep and it was very moody. It was a completely different style. The album sold over 600,000 copies in its first week, and it won Best Rap Album at the Grammys. And 2 months after the release of this album, Drake decided that he wanted to embark on his own tour. And he invited 2 guys to join him as the opening acts to his tour. There was one rapper that came from Compton, and the other rapper was from Harlem, New York. So this tour turned out to be the highest grossing rap tour that year. It grossed over 50 million, and they made stops in 60 different cities around the world. So now at this point, I can imagine being Drake. I mean, I've been signed to Lil Wayne. I just won a Grammy. I've had this ridiculously successful career. Like, there's no one better than me. I mean, not everyone likes me, but who else is there? Like, who else can lead the next generation of hip hop?
Who are you? Kendrick Lamar.
Until Kendrick Lamar showed up. Kendrick Lamar Duckworth was born on June the 17th, 1987 in Compton, California. His father, Kenny Duckworth, and his mother, Paula, both originally lived in Chicago, Illinois. His father was the leader of the Chicago gang known as the Gangster Disciples. Paula, who didn't have any children at the time, decided that she had had enough with that lifestyle, and she gave Kendrick's father an ultimatum, and he chose her. So they both packed their things up and they moved to LA. Paula had family in LA, but they were still completely broke, and apparently even spent a bit of time living in their car until Paula's sister managed to get them some money to move into a motel for a while. Both Kenny and Paula found work in fast food restaurants and eventually got on their feet. This is when they decided to have Kendrick and his 2 younger siblings. But it became pretty evident that the street life in Compton was pretty similar to the street life that they were trying to get away from in Chicago. But at least they didn't have to worry about Kenny being a part of it anymore. And with that, they were able to give their children a really lovely home with 2 parents that absolutely adored each other. They played music every day and danced together. It's like their house was just a vibe. Kendrick grew up listening to Daddy Kane, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eazy-E. Like, that was the music that he actually grew up to. And when he was about 8 years old, Kendrick remembers his dad coming home to fetch him so that they could go and see Tupac and Dr. Dre shooting the video for California Love just a few blocks away from them. But living in Compton was very tough for the family. Kendrick remembers being caught in the 1992 LA riot. He was with his father in a car and he could see like flames everywhere, but his dad just stopped the car and he got out and he just started looting with the rest of the people on the street. And around about the same time, he actually witnessed a guy who was like a local dealer, and this guy got unalived like right outside his house, right in front of him. So he was exposed to a lot of violence growing up, and he'd later find out that his dad actually didn't even leave that gang life behind him. He apparently moved to LA and did it without anybody in his family knowing about it. One thing about Kendrick is that he is extremely intelligent. As a child, he remembers the story of how he was in maths class and they were asked a question and he knew the answer, but he was too shy to put his hand up and say anything. And then one girl in the class raised her hand and she said that same answer. And he remembers just being so annoyed with himself for not speaking up. And when he was in 7th grade, they were given an English assignment to write a poem. But he got to school one day and all his friends were practicing and he realized that he had completely forgotten about this. So he just like panicked and just like quickly put something together. And out of everyone in his class, he was the only person that got an A. Kendrick also developed a passion for music like his parents, but he mostly listened to hip hop. Tupac was it for him. He was more than just a fan. He actually studied Tupac and he knew about his upbringing and the person that Tupac had always wanted to be. He dissected every track that Tupac wrote. But when Tupac was gone, he started to gravitate towards DMX, who is also someone that could make a good club banger, but could also make you feel really sentimental through his incredible storytelling. Apparently the album It's Dark and Hell is Hot is the album that gave us Kendrick Lamar. Like, it made him want to start rapping. So he went to Centennial High School. This is where he would meet the 2 people that would change his life. In 10th grade, he met Dave Free, who was another little nerdy hip-hop enthusiast who also was quite the little hustler. Dave was a local DJ and hosted these little rap battles during lunch breaks. He had created a little studio in his own home to help the people that were talented and actually wanted to make music. So one of the kids that did these rap battles actually introduced Kendrick to Dave. Kendrick started rapping for him and Kendrick was in. So they started recording music and Kendrick became known as K. Dot, someone that you do not want to come across in a rap battle.
I'm wise like my pops, but I'm young mother. I'm the one mother. Plus around hustlers. You want it? They can serve you like a butler.
Kendrick also made friends with a very intelligent and extremely confident young lady that went by the name Whitney Alfred. The 2 became really close friends and kind of didn't have a choice but to become an item. And to say that they've been a private couple is an understatement. Very little information is available about Whitney. It seems like she's been estranged from her father, and this has had a very big effect on her life. There's also been a lot of talk online about people questioning her ethnicity. Apparently her father is black and her mother is biracial. So after Whitney and Kendrick graduated in 2005, she enrolled to California State University, Long Beach, where she obtained a degree in accounting. but she later became a licensed esthetician, and today she runs a very successful business as a beautician. So Kendrick's first mixtape was called The Hub City Threat, Minor of the Year.
With him back against the wall, K-Dot they trying to pin, but they can't fuck with that pen. The shit I write is brighter than blue gems. You better
So he was still in high school when he released this, and it actually did okay locally. Day Free gave it to a local record label owner called Anthony Tiffin, aka Top Dog. Anthony used to be a very notorious gang member who had now turned his life around and had started TDE, Top Dog Entertainment. And Kendrick landed a deal with TDE at 16. He was actually their second signee. The first was J-Rock, who was a really good local artist as well. And to show you the kind of reputation that Anthony had, when he was trying to set up the record label, he knew that he wanted to sign Jay. And Jay found out that Anthony was looking for him, and he ran. The dude ran away. When Anthony found him, he was like, "Hey, you rap? I have a label, let's do this." So not long after this, Kendrick was put in a group called Black Hippie, which consisted of J-Rock, Kendrick, Absol, and Schoolboy Q.
You niggas don't fit the bill. You niggas don't keep it real. You fake as Pamela's titties. I pound kitties, then hit the club with dogs with me.
In 2006, he found himself having his first concert, and he was sharing the stage with The Game. In 2007, he released his second mixtape, Training Day, which was named after the movie Training Day.
They say I'm seeing more paper, true, but only if you knew that I was in your house right now taking the paper from you. Where you safe at?
And in 2009, he released his third mixtape, C4.
Be the greatest for the ages of the young. Watch the game like a raven, craving rappers till I'm numb. Novocaine can contain the...
So at this point, people kind of knew about him. Like, he was pretty cool. He was a very gifted storyteller, really good at freestyling. Don't even get me started at battle rapping. His music was made to connect with people. Like, there was nothing flashy about it. He was a minimalist, and all that kind of held him back a little bit. I mean, the best way to describe him at this point was that he was just this really well-kept underground secret. But Kendrick needed so much more than what he was getting. Like, he had this deep, deep love of hip-hop, and it just came so effortlessly to him. He knew that there was something more to this, and he felt like he needed to explore it to its fullest potential. Kendrick, I'm not sure if he was fully aware of it at this point, but you can definitely already see elements of him being a hip-hop purist. A purist is someone who advocates for the strictest principles or standards in any field. So a hip-hop purist will stick to the following elements. Authenticity. Some say that authentic hip-hop incorporates real life situations and conditions into lyrics. Simplicity. Some hip-hop purists focus on solid lyrics and less of production and music. And transparency. Some say that reality rap, where artists are transparent and share their experience, is the purest of hip-hop. So Kendrick rebranded himself, and instead of going by the name K-Dot, he went by the name Kendrick Lamar. And this is when he made his first EP, which was self-titled, to set us up for the artist that we all know today. And he starts sharing his story with his audience. Kendrick also has a song in this album called She Needs Me, where he talks about a confident young woman that he suggests needs him. But by the end of the song, he realizes that he needs her. And this song was actually about Whitney. And then in 2010, we had the beginning of the Hard series. And this is basically a track that Kendrick releases right before he releases a new album. And it usually involves him sort of bearing his soul and giving us insight into his life.
J. Cole running late. If he don't show up, think I can take his place? Ladies start laughing. No pun intended. I ain't being sarcastic.
In this, The Hard Part 1, he talks about his mission, which is to obtain immortality in hip-hop. And then he also mentions an incident that took place over the 2010 XXL freshman issue. So there's a tradition that started in 2007, it skipped 2008, where XXL releases an annual freshman class list. The issue features 10 to 12 artists to watch, all appearing on the cover of the magazine. The list has a history of showcasing unknown underground rappers, as well as artists considered to be on the rise. Kendrick went on the photo shoot to accompany J-Rock, who had made the list that year. But J. Cole was also supposed to be on the cover, and J. Cole was a no-show. He was in Miami, I think, and this shoot was taking place in New York. So no one was really sure if he'd even make it. He was like 8 hours late. So Kendrick sees an opportunity, and he goes up to the guys at XXL, and he says, "Hey, I'm here as a replacement." And they basically laughed in his face. So then we got the overly dedicated mixtape, and in this you'll find the ROTC interlude, a track of him basically toying with the idea of giving up and just going to sell so that he can make money quicker.
This is me thinking at 4:43 a.m. June 6th. Sometimes I wanna say fuck rapping, I need money now, like should I start trapping? If what I write down don't collect this very moment, then I'm on it, no question, the streets my...
But little did he know that his luck was about to change. There was a track in the album called Ignorance is Bliss, and this caught the attention of Eminem's manager, Paul Rosenberg. Paul told Dr. Dre about Kendrick, and then Dre did a bit of Googling of his own, and he was pretty blown away by Kendrick's music, so he gave Kendrick a ring. Kendrick thought that this was a prank and he hung up. So they managed to get that sorted, and Kendrick had a meeting with Dr. Dre. So one thing that isn't really spoken about is that in 2010, Kendrick was also featured in the Monster freestyle.
Nigga, I'm Compton, big ass condom, motherfuck your problems. I'm killing every instrumental and I co-sign them, and no 360 deals.
And this is when we actually first heard Kendrick dissing everybody in the music industry. He tells Jay-Z that he needs to retire. He tells Lil Wayne, Lupe Fiasco, Kanye West that they all need to watch out for him because he's coming for them. And then in 2011, Kendrick is finally invited to do the XXL cover. And then in 2011, Kendrick was in Toronto doing a show, but he receives a call, and it's Drake. So Drake says that he wants to meet up with Kendrick for a drink, and Kendrick's just done a show, but he's like, okay, cool. So they go out, and he actually is pretty impressed with Drake, who's a pretty big star at this point. Drake apparently tells Kendrick that he is a huge fan, and the two really hit it off. Kendrick even plays Drake some of his music from his upcoming album, Section 80, and Drake was just completely blown away. He even asks Kendrick to feature on a track in his upcoming album, and Kendrick is just like blown away by that. So in the XXL interview, Kendrick actually talks about how he met Drake and how he thinks that he's different from the other people in the industry, which is filled with like really fake people. In the album Take Care, Kendrick does the interlude Buried Alive, where he actually talks about how concerned he is with fame and how he hopes that the industry doesn't consume him. And he talks about his girl saying that the reason why I'm breathing all the vanity I know, the reason why my best friend said she loved me more than life, but I live a double life and I need to let her go. And from what we know, at that time, Kendrick and Whitney had actually gone their separate ways.
The sky's falling, the wind is calling, stand for something or die in the morning. Section 80.
So in 2011, Kendrick releases Section 80, which is his first studio album. And this is when he really shows the world the Kendrick that we know today. This is an album that is named Section 80 based on Section 8 housing, which is where he's from, and he raises the important social issues that Black Americans born in the 80s were faced with, and of course he does this all while showcasing his lyrical genius. So there are songs such as Fuck Your Ethnicity, which, despite how it sounds, is him actually talking about how he doesn't care about race, and anyone can actually listen to his music. It doesn't matter where you're from. And there's a track called Keisha, which is actually a song that he wrote for his sister and is based on the story of a woman that he went to high school with. And he noticed that she had now turned into a prostitute. He's not saying that there's anything wrong with prostitution. What he's saying is that it exposes you to situations and it's just not a great place to be in. And from his view, he doesn't think that anyone should ever find themselves in a vulnerable position like that. And then the 19th of August happened. Kendrick was performing at a concert in LA and The Game appeared on stage, and soon after Snoop Dogg, Corrupt, Daz and Warren G all came out to offer their own cosigns. It was a gorgeous moment. Kendrick was labeled as the king of West Coast hip hop, and he wasn't even a mainstream rapper yet. Like, he would normally perform in front of crowds of like maybe 300 people, and this was a moment that just meant so much for him. It's such a beautiful moment. He can't even hold back the tears, and all you can hear is just the crowd like chanting his name. This is something that must have really caught Drake's attention and start making him look at Kendrick sideways. Now, remember the tour that we spoke about where Drake took two artists, one being from Compton, which is Kendrick Lamar, and the other being from Harlem, which is A$AP Rocky. Well,
10,000, I gotta really work some motherfucking magic and step my game all the way up, but it's a challenge. I love it though. So nigga Drake holding us down, you know what I mean, pulling us out there to see this motherfucking crowd that we ain't seen before. Me and A$AP, Chase, it's a lovely movie, man.
Rap is an ever-changing cycle, and that the change within is inevitable. So you may have had like a favorite rapper for the last 10, 15 years, and they may only have 1 or 2 albums left, and that's okay. That's just how this shit goes. But I promise you, each and every one of you are responsible for the 4 individuals on this stage, and we will rep for y'all to the day they lay us flat on our motherfucking back, nigga. What's up? Like I said, this is my brother A$AP Rocky. This is my brother Kendrick Lamar. This is my brother Chasing Cash. We all ask you just one favor. Y'all keep working on being the beautiful people that you are, and we're gonna keep giving you this music that you love so much. In San Diego, thank you for one of the greatest nights of our lives, and until the next time we see you, take care!
That happened, and then in 2012, Kendrick was officially signed to Aftermath. And in October 2012, he released The Hard Part 3, which was followed by the album Good Kid, Mad City. Now, there's a lot that's being said about this album, and there will probably be many myths about it until the end of time, and it will probably end up being part of the syllabus in the School of Arts at some point. But one thing that I find really interesting about this album is that it's said that Kendrick actually started writing it in 2006 and he'd rewritten it about 4 times since then. The album showcases Kendrick's versatility as an artist as he goes from jazz to funk to club bangers to sentimental. And the album is basically a movie that you're watching with your ears. It tells the story of how he found himself in a really intense situation. There's a track called Shireen where he describes hooking up with a girl, and she was that girl. One night he goes on a date with her and he ends up getting robbed by a couple of guys. So Kendrick's friends want to go and get revenge for him. His friends had also peer pressured him into robbing a house in the track Mad City. And then you get songs like Backstreet Freestyle and Money Trees where he has fully immersed himself into the life of being a street hustler. There's violence and you name it. In Swimming Pools, he talks about how he drank a lot and his conscience is talking to him, reminding him that there is a history of addiction with the men in his family. So Kendrick's friends want to go and get revenge for him, and then things don't really work out the way that they expected, and one of them gets unalived. There's a skit at the end of the Swimming Pools track where they realize that Dave, who was Kendrick's friend, had been caught in the crossfire. Then by the time we get to the track Sing About Me, I'm Done of thirst, it's kind of dawned on him that he's never going to live long enough to actually get to make his dreams come true if he carries on with the way that he's carrying on right now. The way that Kendrick is able to convey his emotions at that point is just incredible. You realize that this is someone who has been through so much and that he's got survivor's guilt. But he was a good kid and he had so much going for him. So it ends with him saying to his friends that they just can't carry on like this. A woman just comes out of nowhere while they're all having a discussion and tells them to accept God into their lives, and they get baptized. And with all that being said, there is also quite a bit of humor in this album. You've got Kendrick's parents who just keep like popping up in like skits and they just keep phoning him and trying to find out where he is. His mom is complaining about him having her car this entire time. The whole thing, like, you better not be with that girl Shireen. And then you've got his dad who's in the background who's just complaining about his dominoes. It's hilarious. And then at the end of the album though, they do kind of realize why Kendrick isn't responding to any of their messages and begging him to come home and not choose this life. Especially his father, who throughout the album had been talking to him as a dad, like talking to a son, like, hurry up, come home, don't mess around. But by the time he gets to this point, his dad is talking to him man to man and saying like, hey son, do not choose this life. I've been there before. Please don't do this. Come back home.
It's crazy because I always go back to the story that I was the only one probably the only one in America with an actual active father in his life. I don't know. Well, at least in Compton. He always had so much of a love for me. He gave me the wisdom in the game to say, you know what, I did that, don't do that.
This album wasn't like anything that we had ever experienced before. It was extremely personal. And we also get the idea of him sort of having these two sides to him. There's this part of him where he's just like a really smart, like shy person. And then there's this other side of him where he acts like a person that grew up in Compton. So this album was huge. Like, it's still very, very big even today. At this very moment, it's number 36 in the Billboard 200, and it's been there for 638 weeks, which no other hip-hop artist has done before. I mean, this album is now more successful than Kanye West's Graduation album. And not long after this, he gets featured on the A$AP Rocky track, Fucking Problems, along with Drake. So Kendrick during this time was on tour a lot and he was just living in a bus. And he dated a rapper called Nitty Scott. And she says that they're together for a while, but it never blossomed into anything serious. And she says that it's because her team just didn't think that he was a good fit for her. But anyway, Kendrick did an interview with Erykah Badu and they discuss what it's like for him to be single. And it's pretty clear that the dude just doesn't trust anybody that he meets on the road. And Erykah asks him, like, who do you trust? Is there anyone that you can talk to, even if you know that it's someone that's like just setting you straight for your own good? And he said yes, like it's actually been a young woman who's been my best friend since high school. And I think that this made him realize how much he missed Whitney. And not long after this, they got back together, although they wouldn't actually make their first appearance until about 2014 at the Grammys. So we actually had no clue what she looked like. And then we had a moment that started to sour Kendrick's friendship with Drake a little bit. In 2012, DMX did an interview on The Breakfast Club saying that Drake just pisses him off and he wishes that he could beat him up. And Kendrick apparently heard this on the radio while he was on a tour bus. And when asked about this in an Avenue A interview, he says that he thought that it was funny. And now with everything that we know about Drake today, imagine how he felt when he heard that.
I wonder why these in the front of the bus just cracking up, like hitting walls and shit, just crying. I'm like, what you niggas talking about? They mute, they stop laughing, right? I just hear X going off on a laptop, just spazzing. I'm like, what's going on? And it's like, yeah, he's going in right now.
And to make things worse, Kendrick had a phenomenal year. I mean, Drake also did have a phenomenal year, which is what he does. But now, the newbie was not only being compared to, but he was smashing it. Kendrick was being referred to as the hip-hop savior. He was awarded MTV's Hottest MC of 2013. His peers were so happy for him and everyone came out and said congratulations, except for Drake. And Kendrick then goes on to also win Best Male in Hip Hop. And then in August, we had Control. This was a track that was meant to be on Big Sean's second album, Hall of Fame, but was cut from that album due to sample clearance issues. So Big Sean managed to release it under a promotional single because he says that he knew that this was the track. So on the track, he features Jay Electronica and Kendrick Lamar. And at this point, it's one of the most popular tracks in hip hop. But if you ask anybody what Jay Electronica says, they won't tell you. That's how good Kendrick was in the song.
Rhyming with, but this is hip hop, and them niggas should know what time it is. And that goes for Jermaine Cole, Big Crit Wale, Pusha T, Meek Mills, A$AP Rocky, Drake, Big Sean, Jay Electron, Tyler McMillan. I got love for you all, but I'm trying to murder you niggas. Trying to make sure your core fans never heard of you niggas.
This track marked one of the most pivotal moments in hip hop history.
And I just feel like, hey man, this is pushing the culture forward. I knew what it was going to do. This is the most exciting rap song that's dropped in years.
And Big Sean knew exactly what he was doing when he released this. He knew exactly what Kendrick's plan was. Kendrick just felt like he needed to call these guys out and be like, hey, you guys need to step up. And if you don't, I'm taking over. And these are all his peers. He clearly says that he's got love for all of them, but he's trying to raise the bar up. And for the most part, these guys did try to step up. Drake made it clear that he didn't get this at all, saying that he bumped into Kendrick backstage at the MTV Awards, and Kendrick was not about this at all. He was very civil.
You know, created out of thin air sometimes. And I think that's one of those things.
You should get into a rap battle.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I feel like that's just, I feel like those things are of the moment.
Yeah, but you're qualified.
Yeah, no, I'd hold it down.
It'd be enjoyable.
Yeah, but I do, like, I really do this, like, as far as writing goes, and it would have to be warranted because it would be scathing. The bars would be scathing. I can't just do it at it. I can't be the first one. You know, I'm always.
You wouldn't do it for sport ever?
Like just to call someone out?
No, like after Kendrick's thing, you wouldn't. I noticed you didn't really get into that too much. So
I just I don't know. It just wasn't real to me. It's like I saw him after that, and it was just like love. So it's like, was that real or was that just like for the people? You know what I mean?
I think it's a sparring kind of sport.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, you know, then let it be real then, you know, I mean, because those were harsh words, right? So it's like, you can't just say that and then see me and be like, yeah, man, what's up? Pretending like nothing ever happened. Like, that's not real. That's not, to me, that's not like the nature of battling. I mean, there's passion behind it. There's anger behind it, you know, and.
To me, it sounded like Drake was trying to imply that this was a tough guy act. And to prove that, no one can even remember how it starts. Not only that, but he would be interested to see if Kendrick can actually stay relevant. And he was like, yeah, sure, he had a good album, but the only people that he was worried about were the people who were consistent.
When it comes to competition, I'm more worried about consistency. I'm more worried about bodies of work. I'm talking about hit records. I'm talking about, I'm basically talking about, like, you know, there's one guy who's up every night thinking about how to get better and how to do things bigger. And, you know, that's Kanye West. He's like, you know, he's always gonna be the guy that's trying to outthink and outdo, you know, everybody. So for me, that would be like, you know, that's my guy that I aspire to surpass, you know what I mean? And as far as Kendrick goes, like, I can't wait to see what he does, because now it's time to show and prove. And consistency it's been one album. Consistency is like, you need more than one album.
And it's just like, my goodness, Drake, what? I mean, look at how everyone else reacted.
He said my name, like he said a couple people's name, and he said he's the best rapper. I say I'm the best rapper every song I'm on.
Yeah, but he wasn't coming at him in a disrespectful way. He's coming at him in a competitive way.
So for me, it's one of those things where I appreciate. I didn't take it necessarily as a diss. Hip hop is competitive, but I mean,
Pusha T went on to give Kendrick a call and just called him up to the studio, and they went on to make a ridiculous banger of a song called Nostalgia, which is even today still one of my favorite hip-hop songs of all time. They all knew that this had nothing to do with one man's ego. Kendrick was trying to save hip-hop when everyone, even its giants, were all sleeping. So anyway, this motivated Drake because in 2013 we had Nothing Was the Same, and nothing really was the same. like Drake actually meant business with this album. When you listen to it, you can hear how he tried to regain his position as the best rapper. This is where he had tracks like Own It, Wu-Tang Forever, Worst Behavior, Hold On, We're Going Home. Like, this album was a commercial success, debuting at #1 on the US Billboard 200 with 658,000 copies sold in its first week of release. But fans couldn't help but notice that there was a bit of a sneak diss in the track, The Language.
I don't know why they been lying, but your shit is not that inspiring. Fuck any nigga that's talking that shit just to get a reaction. I am the kid with the motor mouth, I am the one you should worry about.
And apparently Kendrick was very well known for being a freestylist and battle rapper that would rap really quickly.
That boy remind me of a young Martin Luther, the way he beats up troopers around them shooters like Malcolm X did. I stand for what I believe in. That's family, God, and honor. From Chicago, my daddy and my mama came to Compton to accomplish one thing, raise a king, reign supreme, named Kid.
And this basically marked the beginning of the decade-long Cold War between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. But then Kendrick Lamar was also just going through like this really like insane fame at this time. Like Drake very much just went straight to the back of our minds again. At the BET Hip Hop Awards, Kendrick won Lyricist of the Year, MVP of the Year, Album of the Year, Feature of the Year through A$AP Rocky's track. And Drake did get a few awards. He won People's Champ Best Hip Hop Video and Track of the Year. But if you look at this, like, I don't mean the amount of awards that they won, like the actual award. It's very clear that Kendrick Lamar is being shown a lot of respect for his music, and Drake is pretty much winning the awards for like having like really good club bangers. And then we had the BET Cypher, where Kendrick used the title of Drake's album, Nothing Was the Same, and refers to him as a sensitive rapper that was named in Control.
And nothing been the same since they dropped Control and tucked the sensitive rapper back in his pajama clothes. Ha ha, joke's on you, high five. I'm bulletproof, your shots will never penetrate. Pin a tail on a donkey, boy.
But when Kendrick was asked about this, he said that it was just nothing. And this just carried on for a while. And what would happen is Drake would like openly diss Kendrick. And I don't know, it seemed like he would go home and it would bother him, and he'd wake up the next day like, oh my God, what have I done? And then he would do something that would make it look like he's trying to squash the beef. And Kendrick would always be like, no, thank you, I'm not interested in that. And Drake has a pattern with doing that, like over and over and over again. Like, we will see it. But every time Kendrick was asked about it, he pretty much would say that he doesn't actually, there's nothing going on. It's like, he's cool. And then we had Drake's Vibe interview, where he just, I don't even know what to say about this, guys. He says, the sentiment he was putting forth is what he should have. Of course you want to be the best. Where it became an issue is that I was rolling out an album while that verse was still bubbling. So my album rollout became about this thing. What am I supposed to say? Like, nah, we'll be buddy-buddy. Mind you, I never said that he's a bad guy or I don't like him. I think he's a fucking genius in his own right, but I also stood my ground as I should. And with that came another step, which then I have to realize I'm being baited and I'm not going to fall. Jordan doesn't have to play pickup to prove that he could play ball. No offense, but I'm not going to give you the chance to shake me necessarily because I feel great. There's no real issue. It's tough because people want to see us tear each other down. I don't want to give them that. There's no point. I have no ill feelings towards that guy. It's just like, it's there for me if I want to fall for it. I'm just too smart for that. Hopefully it's the last time I'm going to talk about this, because every time I open my mouth up about this, they take this piece and take that piece. And he's hungry, so he's going to do what he did, like the BET Cypher. But again, it's not enough for me to go. We haven't seen each other since the BET Cypher, but I'm sure we'll see each other and it'll be cool. And if not, then I guess that's how our story unfolds. Then we had OVO Fest, and Drake went on stage and said this about Kendrick.
And while you all got your phones out, I want to shout out my nigga Kendrick Lamar. Shout out to Kendrick. Kendrick was on my album. We went on tour together. That's one of the hardest niggas alive right there. He's legendary, so shout out to him. He should be standing right there.
Kendrick responded with this on a J-Rock single called Pay For It.
I tell them all to hell, King Kendrick, resurrecting my vengeance, been dissecting your motor mouth till I break down the engine.
And then we had the 56th Grammy Awards, and I will never forget watching this from home because this was when we got that beautiful performance with Kendrick Lamar and Imagine Dragons, and I'll just like never forget watching that. But anyway, that night something really shocking happened, and I think this would probably be the last time that most people, I mean it definitely was for me, when I stopped really taking the Grammy Awards really seriously. Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City album lost Best Rap Album to Macklemore's Heist. To make things worse, the other people that were nominated in that category were Drake, Nothing Was the Same, Jay-Z, Magna Carta, Holy Grail, and Kanye West's Yeezus. Nobody could actually believe what had happened, and there was this huge uproar online, and Macklemore felt like he had to do something. So he actually showed us this text that he had sent to Kendrick that says, "You got robbed, I wanted you to win, you should have, it's weird and sucks how I robbed you." I was going to say that during the speech, then the music started playing during my speech and I froze. Anyway, you know what it is. Congrats on this year and your music. Appreciate you as an artist and as a friend. Much love. It was a little weird for him to say something like that, especially post it, but then Drake had to step in, and it was definitely not his place to step in and say this, but he did anyway. He did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, and this is what he had to say about the whole matter. I was like, you won. Why are you posting your text message? Just chill. Take your W, and if you feel like you didn't deserve it, go get better. Make better music. It felt cheap. It didn't feel genuine. Why do that? Why feel guilt? You think those guys would pay homage to you if they won? To name just Kendrick, that shit made me feel funny. No, in that case, you robbed everybody. We all need text messages. I mean, who does that? Like, to me, this would have been the part that would have inspired me to actually stop plotting. So anyway, Kendrick went on an interview, and this is what he had to say about the whole matter with Drake.
Would Drake be somebody you would like to have some fun with?
Nah, I couldn't. We come from two different worlds, two different backgrounds. I really don't see that playing out, as entertaining. Maybe to, the people listening, but not for myself.
This interview was lethal. Like, how many times has Drake been publicly speaking about Kendrick and taking shots, saying that Kendrick is just not on his level? Kendrick spoke about him once, without him actually even outrightly saying anything bad about Drake. You can tell that Kendrick really doesn't have any respect for Drake. Even if you took away all of Kendrick's achievements at this point, Kendrick still wouldn't look up to him. So anyway, Drake had a lot of other shit that was going on in his life. In 2012, Drake was still hyping The Weeknd, and he even brought him out on tours. They were on stage together in London at the Wireless Festival. But when asked if he would actually seal the deal and sign The Weeknd, Drake said, "As far as on paper, it's all being worked out, but that's not really what counts anyway. What counts to me is the fact that the affiliation is so known. It's all that we really care about." But The Weeknd was very weirded out by this because he did a famous interview a bit later, which we're going to talk about, where he said, "I told him from day one what my decision was going to be. I wasn't going that route. I was going my own route, and he supported me." But Drake was just so desperate to sign The Weeknd. Like, he even planned the structure of OVO in a way that would make his company look more lucrative to The Weeknd. So basically, Drake signed OVO under Warner Bros. Instead of Young Money, who he was supposed to be loyal to. But if he'd signed his label under Young Money, what would happen is UMG, who owns Cash Money, would need to be paid, then Cash Money, then Young Money, and then OVO, and then it gets to The Weeknd. So Drake cut out the middlemen to try and get The Weeknd a better deal, but The Weeknd had already made up his mind, and Republic Records had approached him with a really good deal, and he took it. The Weeknd was just like, "The relationships I made here have helped me so much. I could have gone with another label that was really good at branding, but I'd really built a strong brand myself. I wanted someone who could do what I couldn't. But you can always trust good old Drake to be in his feelings. Drake would go on to upload this really, really famous post on Twitter. "You won't get away with just a thank you. You owe me a favor." Then he would come out in public and make it seem like they're all just friends. And I don't know why The Weeknd would continue to tour with him at this point. Like it happens a lot as well throughout the years. They clearly had an awkward relationship moving forward. Their songs, there are just so many sneak disses. There's 6 a.m. in Toronto, Jodeci Freestyle, King of the Fall. But then you just see them together again. But their relationship did seem like it was just kind of strictly business. In 2013, we started to see the cracks forming in Drake's camp. The Weeknd did an interview with Complex, the famous interview, and he details how half the music that's in the album, Take Care, those were all songs that The Weeknd had written for his own album, House of Blues. So I'm going to read you a snippet of this interview when he talks about how he was sitting in his studio and he had been smoking the herb and was just basically like spaced out. And Drake came in, was listening to a bunch of music and just kept taking and taking and taking. Yeah, we're making the drum loop and I'd smoked, I don't even know how much weed. Even Drake, he came into the session and we were all spaced out. It was terrible how much smoke was in the room. I was surprised that I could even hit a note. I'd sung a melody. It wasn't a hook, just an unfinished lyric. And he just liked it so much. He was like, "I need to have this, man. I know I've already taken it for me and Crew Love and this and that." And me, I was hungry at the time. I was like, dude, take anything. At this point, I was like, hell yeah. It was a little weird because Drake described the incident a little differently.
Love was a song that I actually heard for the first time when I was on the Moment for Life video set with Nicki Minaj, and one of my friends played me the song. You know, at the time we were just building our relationship with The Weeknd, kind of just talking to him for the first time, and it was a song that he had, you know, the hook and his verse was done already.
The whole thing was just wild. And The Weeknd went on to say, and please make a note because it will come up again later. He says, "I was hungry." I was like, dude, take anything. And he also mentions that I gave up almost half of my album. It was hard. I will always be thankful. If it wasn't for the light he shined on me, who knows where I'd be. And everything happens for a reason. So it was clear that The Weeknd felt like he was being screwed over by someone that had been really nice to him. So he wasn't really sure how to take all of this. So The Weeknd released his third mixtape, Echoes of Silence, and he actually released this for free on his website. And so many people went in there and downloaded it that the website crashed. So by 2015, The Weeknd was a huge deal. And this is when Drake and The Weeknd famously went head to head on trying to obtain the #1 spot on the Billboard 100. So this would have been Drake's first #1 on the Billboard 100. And obviously this would have been The Weeknd's first one as well. And Drake at this point was by far the bigger star. But The Weeknd, his star was just like seriously on the rise. So Drake had Hotline Bling and The Weeknd had Can't Feel My Face and The Hills. So Drake went online and he posted this to his fans. I spent my life trying to make waves for the city I'm from. No accolades really matter to me other than the fact that I've never had a Billboard #1. If I get my first #1 during the month of October, it will be the greatest moment of my career to date, in my mind. And if you're looking for me on that particular evening, I'll be passed out in the water slide that connects to our pool. I love you and thank you for these memories. I always love the moment right before it happens more than when it actually happens. So thank you, even if it doesn't. But Drake lost. The Hills got the #1 spot and it was there for 6 weeks. I can't imagine what Drake must have felt like in this moment. But he just continued with his sneak dissing, and in 2016, The Weeknd released Starboy, which broke Drake's record of having over 36 million monthly listeners, and The Weeknd had 38 million listeners. And to add insult to injury, he disses Drake on the track called Sidewalks, where he features Kendrick Lamar. The Weeknd says, I ran out of tears when I was 18, so nobody made me but the main streets, because too many people think they made me. Well, if they made me, then replace me. Then again, we'd see The Weeknd and Drake together on stage, but then something really interesting happens. In 2017, the two performed at the OVO Fest, and Drake randomly says that they're going to reignite OVOXO. And The Weeknd just kind of awkwardly laughs, and he's like standing there, and then he dismisses this. But no, Drake was persistent. He posted a lyric from The Weeknd's song, "You Don't Know What's in Store." And then The Weeknd just kind of ignored it and didn't say anything about it, which must have really pissed off Drake, because he started going online and just talking so much crap about The Weeknd. He was talking about how The Weeknd lied about his contribution to the Take Care album, and Academics actually does the interview. And there's a lot of back and forth about this, not just from Drake, but his team also got involved, because this was actually the 6th anniversary of the Take Care album. And The Weeknd was getting a lot of recognition for it. They somehow managed to squash that beef, and then the whole Bella Hadid situation happened. Bella had been dating The Weeknd on and off for a while, and when they broke up this time, guess who swooped in? It wasn't even like a relationship. Drake and Bella had more like a fling, and when it was over, Bella and The Weeknd got back together, and it seemed like that was it. We didn't really hear much about these two for a while. Drake didn't really release any albums between 2013 and 2015. He'd been dealing with a lot behind the scenes with all this, with The Weeknd starting up OVO and dealing with the fact that people didn't even think he was the best rapper anymore. And then he released, if you're reading this, it's too late, in 2015.
Easy on the count.
Now, a lot of people would say that this is Drake's best album, because this is the first time you get unapologetic Drake, and he's more like raw, and not even like weirdly cocky Drake. Like, I'm talking about like Drake, like just at the perfect temperature. In this album, you get 6 God, Know Yourself, Legend, 10 Bands, and Energy. It was very clear that something had changed in Drake. Like, he went from like being a ladies man and smooth and moody music to just being like really gangster, like a proper like thug. So Kendrick was actually dealing with like bigger problems than Drake at this point. I mean, maybe they were dealing with the same issues, but Kendrick was going about it differently. We didn't hear from him for a while. He left the US actually and moved to South Africa for a while. And then when he got back, we got to Pimp a Butterfly.
It's me and my homeboys in front of the White House. It's really taking, people from my neighborhood and taking them around the world and letting them see things that I've experienced. The people I grew up with since elementary, all the way up to now, so a lot of individuals that I talk about in Good Kid, Mad City is on this cover, so it all spins around. Full circle.
So Good Kid, Mad City, as we've already discussed, tells the story of a teenager who is very ambitious, trying to navigate through life and really kind of struggling, but he wants to kind of make it out the hood and be famous. So now To Pimp a Butterfly is now the story of how that boy is now a grown man who has achieved success, doing that all while following his passion, but everything around him is still so messed up. And none of the success, none of the money has made him any happier.
Really, money really don't make me. I'm learning that now. That's not really my peace of mind, having money.
And if anything, the position that he's in now has actually kind of brought more issues, because now he's struggling with the battle of how to keep his authenticity. So this made him feel like really drained and depressed, and he just felt like he didn't even know what the point of any of this was anymore. So again, Kendrick gives us an album that tells a story, and you actually can't shuffle the tracks in this album. You need to listen to them in order. The story can be broken down into 5 sections, and there is an overarching story. It consists of 16 tracks, and in the first part, Kendrick is a caterpillar. In the song Wesley's Theory, he says that he's uneducated, but he just got a $1 million check. He's excited about starting his career and is thinking about all the things that he'll do with his money. Then we're introduced to the man. The man hates it when black people have money.
We should never gay. We should never gay.
Money go back home. Money go back home.
The man has an uncle called Uncle Sam, and Uncle Sam is American capitalism. He encourages Kendrick to spend all his newfound money and says that when he runs out of money, he can just borrow more money. The man says that my uncle's going to Wesley snipe you before you even turn 35. Kendrick evokes Rick James, Dave Chappelle, and Michael Jackson.
Hey man, Andy, are you okay? Andy, are you okay?
Who are all black men that struggled with fame and fell victim to the man and Uncle Sam and essentially were pimped out by the system. So Kendrick starts to become aware of the fact that Uncle Sam is trying to trap him. And then you get King Kunta, which is the third track of the album. The name of the song is actually a perfect way to describe Kendrick's state of mind at this point. He's King Kendrick, and he knows that. But the name Kunta is referring to the character Kunta Kinte from the novel Roots, Saga of an American Family. And we all know that Kunta Kinte was a slave who had his foot cut off. So he's King Kendrick, but he's also a slave to the system, and everybody wants to cut the legs off him. In the video, you see him in Compton, his home, and he's kind of flexing on everyone, showing everybody that he's made it. And then at the end of the song, you hear a little snippet of a poem saying, I remember you as conflicted, misusing your influence. And we all kind of noticed that there were some really strange lines that he throws in this song.
I can dig rapping, but a rapper with a ghost rider. What the fuck?
And then in the fourth track, Institutionalized, Bilal sings the chorus saying, shit don't change until you get up and wash your ass. And this is saying that he needs to work on himself, or he's definitely heading down the road of being pimped. And this ushers us into the next phase. So then track 5, These Walls, starts with us hearing more of the poem. I remember you as conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same. In the song, Kendrick talks about how he was able to have relations with a woman that wanted to sleep with a famous rapper. And it turns out that this woman is the mother of the children of the man that and friend Dave in Good Kid, Mad City. So at this point, he starts to feel like he's a bit off because he's using his fame to take advantage of this woman. And there are many other things that he's worried about in the person that he's becoming because of the fame and the money. And this is when he goes into a deep depression. And at the end of the song, you hear more of the poem. Abusing my power, full of resentment that turned into depression, found myself screaming in a hotel room. And then we have the track You, which actually starts with him screaming. If you haven't heard this track before, it is a very difficult song to listen to, but I do encourage you to listen to it. So it's basically, there are no subliminals. It's just straight up Kendrick having a meltdown. And the track is so trippy. You're in his mind, experiencing his depression with him. Mixed by Ali talks about the creative process of the song and how uncomfortable it was for him to be there and actually witness Kendrick create the song. He says that Kendrick was recording it in the dark and was extremely emotional. He calls himself a failure because his sister that he had actually written a song for in the Section 80 album, she ended up getting pregnant at 13. And then a friend of his, while he was on tour, and he didn't get a chance to actually come back and see him while he was in hospital. And then it seems like we have a little bit of hope in track 7, All Right. He starts to feel a little sense of empowerment, but it's just a little hint because in the second verse of the track, this is when you're introduced to Lucy, and this is short for Lucifer. And this character is really trying to tempt Kendrick with all kinds of things that can trip him up. Didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me, so I went running for answers. And after the track 8, For Sale, he says, so I went running for answers until I came home. So we're now at the phase where Kendrick is actually working on himself. He goes to Compton and then to the motherland. He's feeling a little deflated in the song Hood Politics. He discusses feelings of survivor's guilt, and his travels to Africa make him realize that he actually doesn't know as much as he thinks he knows. Africa was a big eye-opener for him. In the song Mama, he's talking to an African child and is saying that they're the same, but America has made him forget about his heritage. At the end of Hood Politics, we hear, but that didn't stop survivor's guilt, going back and forth, trying to convince myself the stripes I earned, or maybe how AI my foundation was. But while my loved ones was fighting a continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one. And then in the final phase, Kendrick is now a butterfly. He has been transformed by his external factors and has returned back to Compton. In the song I, he talks about how much he now accepts himself, and the overarching theme here is that he's learned so much from his travels and he's taken this knowledge and is planning on using it for good. And then we have the final track, Mortal Man. Kendrick discusses black men such as Nelson Mandela, Malcolm X, and how they were treated as black leaders. He questions the loyalty of his fans. And you know how we've had this poem that seems to be the basis of the different phases of the album? At this point, he finally goes into it. And guess who responds to him? Tupac. Kendrick has been reading this poem to Tupac this whole time. And Tupac's responses to him are based on an interview that took part in 1994 for P3 Soul. And this is a very powerful moment because the conversation isn't real, but you get how in tune Kendrick is to Tupac's message, on how he feels about his role to carry on Tupac's legacy. He says that sometimes when he gets on stage, he gets this energy and he doesn't know where it comes from. And Tupac's response is that because it's spirits, we ain't really rapping. We just letting our homies tell the story for us. This is so wild. Kendrick actually revealed that the album was originally called To Pimp a Caterpillar. And then Kendrick performed the song All Right at the BET 2016 Awards. And although this was labeled as an incredible performance, not everyone was happy. And this is what Fox News had to say about it.
Did you catch that? Lamar stated his views on police brutality with that line in the song, quote, "And we hate the po-po, want to kill us in the street, faux show." KG.
Oh, please. Ugh, I don't like it. I mean, you know I don't like it. That's why you came to me. It doesn't excite me. It doesn't turn me on. It doesn't interest me. I'm not feeling it.
Harala, not helpful with those song lyrics.
To say the least. Not helpful at all. This is why I say that hip-hop has done more damage to young African Americans than racism in recent years.
And Tommy, look at that police
It incites violence.
You sure it was planned? It looks like a spontaneous demonstration to me.
Who pushed the video?
No, a rapper who's anti-police? I mean, it's never happened before.
Let's move on to this one.
And then after this album, Kendrick had solidified his position as being probably the most influential rapper of this generation. And this album actually went on to reach new heights because in 2015, there were protests that took place in Chicago in response to the multiple incidents of police brutality towards black people. And this was called the Black Lives Matter movement. Once the police arrived and tensions started to rise, there is a really good chance of things escalating, but the crowds just started chanting, "We're gonna be all right." And then again, in the beginning of 2020, we had the COVID pandemic, and the whole world just kind of didn't really have anything to do apart from taking a step back and reflecting on the world. And America, again, had a series of events that were continuing to happen involving police brutality. And the brutal of George Floyd that was caught on camera was the tipping point, and this started countrywide riots. So I was watching this from a distance and I was just very emotional during this time, and I can't imagine what it must have felt like being in America and actually going through all of this. And again, people were chanting, "We're gonna be all right," and the track became the track of the Black Lives Matters movement. But he gave his listeners a sense of empowerment. Like, his music really electrifies you. So meanwhile, Drake was still stepping on people's toes and getting himself into all sorts of trouble. In 2015, Drake and Meek Mill actually got into a bit of a beef. So Meek started writing a series of tweets talking about how Drake doesn't write his own raps. So there's a guy called Quentin Miller who is apparently writing quite a good chunk of Drake's music. So let's talk about Quentin a little bit. Quentin actually has a very sad story. He's an artist from Atlanta who's been hustling for so long, and he was told that he actually didn't have any star power by Tricky Stewart and The Dream. Carried on with his day job, but at the same time he was still hustling and putting his music out there. And one day he sent a song called 10 Bands to O.V. Brian and Wonder Boy.
Yeah, Wonder was like, yo, he's fucking with this 10 Bands song. He's fucking with this hard. So yeah, I was really excited. I thought I was gonna have a Drake feature. Because at the time Drake was just doing random features for just up and coming artists. You know, so I thought I was about to be one of those lucky artists. And yeah, it turned out to be what it was.
So they sent him back a track and they were like, okay, so what do you think of this? And he listened to it and it was just literally the song that he had sent them as it was, but it was not his voice. It was Drake.
Oh, okay, 10 bands, 50 bands, 100 bands, fuck it, man. I'm trying.
10 bands, 50 bands, 100 bands, fuck it, man.
So the tracks ended up in the If You're Reading This, It's Too Late mixtape.
Okay, so you get in the studio with Drake and you end up basically co-writing what became Used To, 10 Bands, Legend, and 6 Man?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, at the time, I don't know, it just felt like a dream because everybody was just so welcoming. It just felt so cool. I felt like I was, a part of the shit. Like, Drake literally was looking me in my face like, yo, man, this album wouldn't be possible if it weren't for you. Like, you really helped. You have no idea. Da, da, da.
So he said that Drake seemed to really appreciate what he did, and he even got mentioned in the credits. And then Meek came with the tweets and it got people upset, and 40 made the following statement. There's countless number ones and songs Drake has written for others, never mind himself. That's the funny part, lol. If someone wants to be upset that Drake made a great album, go for it. Get mad all day. But don't ever question my brother's pen. I've spent maybe 30 minutes in the studio with Q. Nice enough guy, very talented. If you're asking if Q contributed if you're reading this, yes, he did. You can also see that by reading the credits. And then Quentin did the following, which turned out to be a very, very bad move. He sat down with Billboard magazine and basically said that most of the project was done before I came in the picture. I remember him playing it for me for the first time, thinking, like, why am I here? Like, what does he need me for? He then goes on to say that I am not and never will be a ghostwriter for Drake. I'm proud to say that we've collaborated, but I could never take credit for anything other than the few songs we worked on. So Quentin denied everything, and this really pissed off Meek Mill. So what he did is he found Quentin, and him and his goons beat him up.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They caught me. We was in LA. I was walking to the Nike store, and he approached me, and this was really my first time really talking with me, and basically he told me like, he didn't appreciate the letter that I dropped, and it made him seem like he was a liar or whatnot, and they fucking stole off on me in the Nike store and ran. I shed blood in the Nike store on Wilshire.
And then that wasn't even the worst part. Quentin got blackballed. And the worst part is Meek Mill and Drake had kind of squashed their beef. So Quentin went back to his life, and Drake and Meek Mill just carried on with their lives as if nothing had happened.
Like, you saying this to a dude that was working in the bakery, you know what I'm saying? Like, I thought my drink was over with after Tricky and them dropped me off, like I was fucking crying like a baby, because I'm like, how the fuck else am I going to do this? They were the people that I knew, and I ain't have nobody else, so it just felt like it was just one of the best times, yeah, it felt like I was on the team.
So anyway, the whole ghostwriting thing, it didn't really sit well with the other rappers in the industry. And the reason behind that is that rap gained its legitimacy through poetic storytelling. Unlike the other genres of music, rappers talk about their own experiences. And now people were connecting this to Kendrick Lamar's song King Kunta, and they're like, oh, so that's what he was talking about. And this should have been the end of Drake, or at least this should have meant that Drake had now lost any right to claim that he is the greatest rapper of this generation. But he was very clever about how he went about it. The dynamic had completely changed for Drake. I mean, at this point, he was just like, you know what? If I'm not going to earn people's respect through the content or the things that I'm putting into my music, then I'm going to earn people's respect through the numbers. When Meek started posting those tweets, Drake responded with a diss track called Charged Up. And a few days later, he released back-to-back before Meek had even had a chance to reply. And the song was a banger. Drake made dissing Meek Mill into a social media trend, and Meek tried to come back with his own diss track, but at that point, nobody cared about what he had to say. And he's pretty much never really recovered from this. So now all the hip-hop heads and the gatekeepers, anyone who is the hip-hop purist, thought that this was blasphemy. Drake had to face some sort of repercussion, but Drake had now built an entirely new audience. This new audience consisted of people who were just casual rap fans, avid social media users. Most of them were Gen Z and maybe the later end of millennials, largely middle-class people who didn't come from black or brown communities. And they were really not interested in the history of the art form. They were not interested in the history of the culture or any of that stuff. All they were interested in was Drake, the superstar rapper that could make hits. That was it. And he was like, finally, all this shit doesn't mean anything. Like, I've been saying that all that matters is that I'm giving you guys song after song, and my music sounds good. This new audience validated him and gave him so much power. Like, for the first time in his life, Drake did not have to worry about anybody. So in 2016, Drake released Views, and this was one of his most successful albums. And I know I've said that a few times, but just to kind of recap, okay, so in 2011 we had Take Care, and that was seen as a critical and a commercial success because that was the first time we sort of heard Drake and his own sound, well, at least what we thought was his own sound. He was making a lot of music prior to that, especially when he was rapping, that sounded a lot more like the sort of Cash Money, like, you know, that sound. And now he had sort of kind of found himself. But then it turned out that apparently The Weeknd gave him like half of the songs that were on that album. And then we had, if you're reading this, It's Too Late. That was the next album that just really blew up for Drake. And for me, it's my personal favorite album from Drake as well. That was when he went from, oh, ladies man, this and that, to just like, I'm a Toronto, like, six guard, like, this is my crew, and the sound, oh my. And then, now we've got Views. So in Views, remember Drake has got this whole new audience. Well, the album sold over 800,000 copies in its first week. By far the most successful album that Drake has had commercially. There was something else that people couldn't help but notice, and that was that, you know, you've got like ghostwriting, but this dude was like proper like wave hopping. So he was working with a lot of new talent, according to him, but really these were artists who were kind of like at the cusp of like stardom. So it would appear as though he's giving someone that he thinks is an up and coming artist more reach, but the true beneficiary of this would be Drake. These were young artists who would usually come in with their own niche audience that they'd build through their underground work, and then he would turn it into a commercially successful song. Sometimes he wouldn't even include the actual artist in the song, he'd just take it And just like that, Drake would be making money from an entirely new audience. So he'd be growing his reach while keeping his current audience happy with consistency and innovation. People believe that he did this to Future and Metro Booming on What a Time to Be Alive to get into the southern rap and trap market. The song One Dance was actually a watered-down version of a song that was really popular in the UK in 2009 that was performed by an artist, Kyla, Do You Mind? And there are many other UK artists who he's worked with to try and tap into the drill market, which he's done very successfully. And he also tried to tap into the African market. He worked with artists such as Wizkid and Thames. And this is actually something that has been referred to as the Drake stimulus package. And this was around the same time that people started to notice that he was actually ripping people off within his own camp. So OVO Records was eventually put together, and one of the first artists that he signed was Party Next Door. Party is a Canadian rapper that has a very similar style to The Weeknd, but Party is definitely more hip-hop focused. He can sing very well, and the boy can write music. So Drake's team found him, and Drake started promoting him heavily. He released his first mixtape, which did very well, and there was like this big hype around him. Like I was one of those people. But Party apparently wrote and sang in the track Wednesday Night from the If You're Reading This It's Too Late album, and he said that the song belonged to him, and Drake apparently just took it. And again, this is someone who's saying that he couldn't really do anything about it because he was really hungry at the time. And this was Drake who actually helped him a bit with promoting some of his own music. But it didn't stop there. There are many songs that he had either solely written or produced, and Drake was just like, oh, thank you very much. But anyway, we got to a point where it was time to release his own music, and the music didn't do well. But the music that he was writing for Drake was doing well, and people were just wondering, like, what's going on? Like, why wasn't he doing well? But believe it or not, this is a happy ending compared to the things that have happened to some of the other artists that signed to the label. McConan is an artist from Atlanta who was making waves on SoundCloud. He was best known for his song Tuesday, and he also released an EP called I Don't Sell Molly Anymore. Drake's team reached out to him, and he was very excited because it's Drake. But apparently they gave him two options. One, he either gets Drake to feature on the song and the song blows up, but he'd have to pay Drake. And the other option was that he would sign to OVO, but that meant that he would take down all of his music from the internet. Mind you, he already had 10 albums. His manager definitely didn't want him to sign the deal, especially because they had other offers. But after he signed to the label and the song Tuesday was released, things changed quite drastically. He apparently had an album that was ready to be released called I Love McConan Too, but it just kept being delayed by the team, and they were saying that he just needed to take another creative direction. There was a lot of tension between him and the label, and one day he went into a radio interview and he performed this freestyle.
Too fucking fly, god damn it, why the fuck should I even keep flowing? Oh, cause this shit is too easy. Shouts out to Gucci Mane and shouts out to Jeezy. Hey, you know my flow get lazy. Still dodging calls from Baby and Jay-Z. Ugh, I'm the man in Manhattan, nigga.
And it was the joke of the internet. And this forced OVO to officially drop him. I don't know, but to me, this guy looked like he just didn't want to be there. There's a very good chance that he actually did it intentionally just to embarrass them and get out of the contract. He's since come out and said that he was not treated very well and he barely met Drake while he was there. And then we had Majid Jordan. These guys are a Canadian artist producing duo. They became very popular online after their EP After Hours was released on SoundCloud. And of course, Drake's team swooped in and these two were signed to the label. And again, came in, he took the song, he added his vocals and it was released. It's a little song that you might know. It's called Hold On, We're Going Home. They've tried to release their own music since then, but it's hardly gotten any attention. Like, they have pretty much been with OVO, but just purely for writing music for Drake. And these are just many examples of the artists that have been signed to the label and they are either blocked from making music or they are basically just not promoted at all. As soon as they sign that contract, the focus is on Drake. But there is one artist who absolutely refused to become one of Drake's victims. That's XXX Tentacion. X was a rapper from Florida who had a very tough childhood. He was a very gifted child, but there were also a lot of things in his environment that also made him a very angry person. He was born with a heart defect and his parents were separated when he was little. His father, who he was very close to, was a musician and dealer and spent a lot of time in prison. He lived with his mom, who was a stripper, and his mom dated. So there's a story about how one day she brought a guy home and she and this guy started arguing and X was in his room and he just apparently heard like a bunch of glasses and dishes breaking, and then he came out to see what was happening, and he says that he was pretty convinced that this person was trying to unalive his mom. So he just quickly picked up like a piece of glass from the floor and he jumped this guy. He spent a lot of time with his uncle, who suffered from depression and outbursts, and he was usually left alone with his uncle while his mom was at work. And one day he came home and found his uncle who had unalived himself. He'd get picked on at school a lot by the other kids and he did not respond very well to it. He'd get into a lot of fights and in some cases even get into fights while standing up for other kids who were being bullied. His childhood was crazy. He was sent away by his mom eventually because of all the trouble that he was getting into, and he moved in with his grandmother.
There will be and always was a void in my heart. And it was just due to the fact that I didn't have my mom for a long amount of time. And my mom was out there trying to hustle, get her money up, you feel me? And she was doing everything she could. And I ain't even from the dub my mom. Like, I love my mom to death. That's the apple in my eye. I'll take a bullet for my mom any day. You take a bullet for my mom right now, no question. No questions asked. But it was just, at the time when she was young, my mom was 17, 18 with a baby. And I mean, her nigga not paying her no mind. She ain't have nobody around, you feel me? So she was just hustling, trying to get out of the mud. She was passing me hand to hand and shit. So it was like.
So you at grandma's house?
Initially, it wasn't even just that. Like, she like to friends and shit, you know what I'm saying? Our babysitters and like distant family and shit like that. It was nothing really too close. So I grew up having to self-soothe, but imagine having to self-soothe and not doing it. And just being like mentally ill from the very beginning and just being depressed from the very beginning. And I mean this like, and I'm saying this like from my heart, like that's really what it was.
He and his grandmother were very close, but he still found himself getting into quite a bit of trouble. And he'd always get arrested for things like selling drugs, house break, possession of illegal weapons, you name it. X knew that he was very gifted. He was in the school choir, but he says that he ended up being kicked out of the choir so that he got into an argument with one of the other kids. So anyway, after a certain point in his life, he was starting to get a bit fed up with this lifestyle, and he and his friends decided that they wanted to try and stay out, and they loved rapping, so they started recording songs. X created a SoundCloud account. There's a trend here. And he started uploading his music. After he noticed one of his songs being noticed and actually noticing how effortless this all was to him, he started learning how to use music production technology and ended up with an EP. He was very quirky. He was a black kid that liked listening to Kurt Cobain. He liked getting into fights, listening to rap and Japanese anime. And there was a point in his life where he just kind of changed his look because he was quite like, he had a very pretty boy image at some point of his life, but then he changed like from this to this, and he started making more mixtapes, and with that he started to also develop quite the following. His group, Members Only, was a group of young men who weren't all rappers, but they were all contributors towards the art form of hip-hop. They would all graft really hard trying to make a name for themselves, and they did, but also developed quite a reputation of being angry. And it even got to a point where there was a fight that was involving X that actually went viral. And this actually made them more famous. So at this point, he started to really see that the one thing that everyone told him was his biggest weakness is now turning out to be his biggest strength. So once people really started listening to his music, he started really working on his brand, and he took off some of the music from SoundCloud to develop this idea of kind of scarcity, and it actually worked. It did make people really want to like kind of find and collect his music. He's actually famously said that one day he hopes that people will start like trading his music like Pokemon cards. In 2015, things really changed for X because he had his breakout single, Look at Me. This debuted at number 94 on the US Billboard Hot 100, and it peaked at number 34. The track charted for 20 weeks, and his following just became insane, guys. Like, it was a small cult-like following, but they were like really hardcore. They wanted to see more and more and more of him. People in the entertainment industry who still weren't really sure who X was, they didn't know what to do about all the requests that they were getting to interview or play this guy's music. Like, it just seemed like he was very niche. So while this was happening, he was facing a case of robbery and assault, and he ended up being held at Broward Regional Juvenile Center. After a few months, he was allowed to be out under house arrest. He was living with his girlfriend at the time, who he was having a lot of issues with, and they got into a domestic, and he'd find himself locked up again, not for domestic violence, but for violating parole. So while he was in prison, something happened. He heard a Drake song called KMT, and this sounded awfully similar to his song.
Demon just got out of can. I gave my bro an advance.
And everyone generally agreed that Drake had stolen the flow to his song, Look at Me. And when X got out, he was fuming. Like, he trolled Drake like there was no tomorrow.
I still think Drake a fuck nigga. I'm keeping a blood raw. I still think Drake a fuck nigga. Like, I think he's not a man. I think he's a bitch. That's a bitch move. Especially when I was in jail facing life, bro. You know what I'm saying? If Drake would have came to my barn hearing, you know what I'm saying, that would have made my fucking day. If he would have showed that he's a hospitable person and that he's really in this shit for the culture, rather than being a fuck nigga taking my shit, running off with it, and then putting it on his album, then he would have got my kudos. He would have got my respect. I would have let him hop on the remix, take 100% royalty rate. I would have done it because I know I can.
Told this nigga Drake, stop speaking patois. You are not Jamaican. I'm a real Jamaican. I'm from Kingston. All of my family is from Kingston. Stop stealing my people's culture. Get the off our. We don't claim you. Stop. We don't want you.
He posted the following. I'm not going to say any names, but it's funny how one of my dudes hit me up saying Drake watched your interview and fucks with you. He was referring to an interview that X did, which was one of his first interviews. I don't know, if you haven't watched it, you need to. It went completely viral, and I will pop it into my video sources. And then he'd go on to say, now this pussy dude trying to play it safe and say it innocent, but it's cool. We all know Hotline Bling was a bite from Cha-Cha. It was so bad. And then Drake was denying all of this and saying that he didn't even know who X was. There was just so much drama, you guys, but it basically ended up getting the attention of The Weeknd and Kendrick Lamar, and they were basically like singing his praise. Kendrick Lamar came out and promoted his music on social media. So anyway, X's music was going viral. Like, I remember my nephews, they were going insane over this guy. And in 2017, he made it on the XXL Freshman's issue, and he was an actual rap superstar. Kendrick even went on to invite X to his Damn Tour, which is an album that we're going to speak about shortly. That same year, X released his album 17, which was huge. But X was really starting to struggle with his celebrity. The more attention he got, the more he got criticized for some of the decisions that he had made in his life. So he started doing a lot of charity work to show that he wasn't actually this monster. Like, he wanted to change. And a lot of the people that X spoke to were people who felt like they were misunderstood.
Life is based off of decisions. It's not about what you're dealt, it's about how you deal with it. In every situation, you must keep your eyes and your mind open at all point in times. Your decisions are what pave your destiny. Fuck what anybody says about you, fuck what anybody does to you. It's how you deal with it that matters. You are all gods of your own. You are all gods. You are all geniuses. You are all stars. You are all super fucking stars. You are all...
I mean, it's a very touchy subject. Like, I'm not even going to try and dissect it. There are a lot of horrible things that he did, but also he had a lot of anger in him and a lot of issues that had never been dealt with.
Online, they say you have a cult following. So it's kind of like, wow, a cult following. How do people just gravitate towards you?
I love these kids.
So it was the music, but do you think your rap sheet had anything to do with that, or was it simply the music?
The depression is real. What is real will prosper. I always say that. That's what I live by. What is real will prosper. I love these kids, and I know what it feels like to be alone. I got alone tattooed on the left side of my face. I know what it feels like to be alone, and I mean that. Like, I know what it feels like to wake up somewhere where you're not supposed to be, around people you're not supposed to be around, and be around. You could be around 1 million people, just like me, you, or bro, or my manager. We could be around 1 million people and still be alone. I know what that felt. I knew what that felt like, and I knew what it felt like being on the verge of wanting to end it all, but being too pussy to do it. I was too pussy to end my life, so I knew that feeling, and I wanted to comfort anybody because I found a way out through the music.
So he was basically working with nothing. I don't know. I didn't know him, and I actually don't want to try and give my opinion on the situation. So, yeah. And then on the 19th of January 2018, we got this video live stream from him.
Okay, guys, so I'm going to be starting a challenge. It's called the Helping Hand Challenge. Whoever makes the most donations gets to meet me, spend a day with me, gets to go out to dinner with me. It'll be a cool reward. But basically, to participate, the one that wins is the one who documents and helps the most, not only homeless, but the most people in need. Whoever does the most good, whoever I see does the most, documents it all, sends it to me, and I'm able to see it, will win the challenge. It's called the Helping Hand Challenge. Hashtag the Helping Hand Challenge.
And a few weeks later, Drake released the following statement. I'm not into challenges on IG. I find them annoying. But today, I'm going to challenge everyone to just go out and do something for someone. Anything. The smallest thing, just to bring another human being some joy. And please tag me in it somehow so I can see the love being spread. You don't have to play the song in the background or have some hashtag. This isn't about streams and all the other tactics being used. Jab. Just go be kind in any way you can, and let's all watch the world be nice for each other, even if it's for 24 hours. And a few hours, he released the video for God's Plan, which he announced had a $1 million budget, but he went around the streets giving that money to people. Mind you, he shot the video for this in Florida. He went to X's hometown, was walking around the streets, handing money over to people. And then X said the following: at Champagne Puppy, hey, I want to say thank you for participating in my challenge and for doing that for the city. I'm really glad you did, but I want to say I'm very disappointed about the fact that you pretty much dissed my challenge. I'm doing my best in doing something positive for the city and the kids. I think it's really immature that you pretty much tried to sneak diss me in the tactic or hashtag remark. We're grown men. If the moves I make inspire or intimidate you, I'm glad. I won't diss you for that. So this is a thank you. But again, respectfully, please stop copying me. You have a good night. P.S. If we could do something together for the families that went through the tragic shooting down the street from me, that would be great. I think they really need us right now. Have a good one. Wow. Then on the same day, X posted the following on Instagram. If anyone tries to kill me, it was Champagne Puppy. Then on the 18th of June 2018, X went to a bank and he withdrew 50K. And he neatly placed it into his Louis Vuitton bag, and a few men saw him do this. They followed him to a motorbike dealership, and this is the CCTV footage of them walking in to suss him out. And you can just tell that X knows what's going on, like the way that they look at each other. So as he was driving out, an SUV blocked him and pointed their weapons at him. There was a tussle for the bag, but he let the bag go eventually. But as the guys were walking away, X apparently looked at one of them in the eye, and they decided to shoot him. X tragically lost his life that day at 20 years old, and he was expecting a baby. To say that X's passing had an effect on people would be a huge understatement. People were absolutely devastated. Adam22 from the No Jumper podcast held a memorial for him, and as he was addressing the crowd, he couldn't even hold his emotions.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's incredible how many people were so deeply affected and moved by X, and it's just like the ridiculous crowd that goes as far as I can see right now is a pretty good symbol of how much of an impact he made on so many people. And I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Obviously, I'm kind of losing my composure here, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are.
Long live X! 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 Long live X!
And I just want to say that there's been a lot of fucking pressure in the media and shit to not fuck with this dude and to not respect him, and really just an effort to turn him into a cartoon and a caricature of something that he really wasn't. And I just want to say that I appreciate anyone who was willing to look past the portrait that was tried to paint of him. And I also just want to say fuck anybody who's disrespected him after his death. And I really mean that. Like, I don't know how to say how much I mean that without saying anything too graphic.
Fuck Drake! Fuck Russ!
Yeah, fuck Russ for real. That's something we could probably all agree on. Again, like, just thank you guys, everybody that he meant something to, and that, I mean, you guys meant the world to him. And in a weird way, when I met him, he kind of knew that something like this was going to happen, I guess. Like, he knew that it was going to affect the world, and he knew that a lot of people were going to be hurt when he left. But I guess we should all just feel lucky that we got to experience it while he was here. So thank you all.
So these guys have been found and convicted since, because they were being really sloppy. I mean, there was evidence everywhere. And it was pretty clear that Drake wasn't involved. But in May 2018, which is before X was unalived, he released the song I'm Upset, and he says, I'm upset, 50,000 on my head, it's disrespect, so offended I had to double check, I'm always trying to take the money over sex, that's why they need me out the way, what'd you expect? End up getting loose and getting pictures from my ex. SMS XXX, that's the only time I ever shoot below the neck. Why you keep, that's the only kind of shit that gets you some respect. And the crazy part about this is that one of X's fans who was at the scene of the shooting, they took a video of X sitting there slumped over in the car, and X was actually beneath the neck. So now everyone's just asking themselves, like, why would Drake write this? It just sounds really weird, but obviously the man can't predict the future. Like, it's just probably all a coincidence. But then X's friend came out and called Drake out for having a man that looks very much like X in the video Sicko Mode. That man gets crushed by what looks like a meteor. Now, this was released after X was unalived.
Today, we're hearing from rapper Drake's attorney. Local 10 News reporter Ian Margol is covering this trial and joins us inside the courtroom in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, this morning, Drake's attorney appeared here in court, and he was addressing an order that the court had released saying Drake had to appear for a deposition. This is all related to the trial for 3 men who are accused of XXX Tentacion back in
Drake ended up not having to go to the deposition because he and his team proved that there wasn't enough evidence to basically tie him to this. Apparently, he had not been investigated at all right from the beginning. There was just like no mention. There was nothing that pulled Drake into this case. There's just like loads of little things that Drake keeps saying in his music that just makes everyone wonder, like, what the hell? Like, why? In 2017, Kendrick Lamar actually released The Hard Part 4, and this was a track that was warning everyone that basically wants to try and test him. And then not long after that, we got the album Damn. Believe it or not, the album is actually deeper than any of his previous albums. He asked the question of choosing between a path of wickedness or weakness. There are a lot of detailed descriptions online about the album, but I'll try and give you a very short summary of it. It's like really cool. If you listen to it from the first to the last track, it tells the story of choosing the path of weakness. There's a track called Duckworth, which may or may not be about his dad and Top Dog. It's the story of how there was a guy who used to run the streets called Anthony. This guy robbed a KFC that Ducky worked in, and Ducky finds out from the streets that Anthony was responsible for robbing the KFC, and he knew that it would happen again. So he started being really nice to Anthony. Like every time Anthony would show up at KFC, he would give him free chicken, free biscuits, just like always throwing something extra. And Anthony did rob the KFC again, and he made sure that nobody harmed Ducky. So Kendrick ends the track by saying that his father's weakness saved him. If Ducky didn't choose to be really nice, weakness, Anthony would have unalived Ducky and he would have been in prison serving life. And Kendrick would have grown up not only without a father, but would have probably ended up in the streets because there'd be no TDE records. If you listen to the album the other way around, he takes the path of wickedness, and it ends with the track called Blood, where he meets a blind woman who tells him that he's lost his life. And there is a and that's it. So people who were non-Kendrick fans, they were saying that this guy, he's just too preachy and he's really hard to listen to. And with this album, what he did was he made a song called Humble, which is a song that has a trap beat. According to Music Vibe, this may be one of the best trap songs that has ever existed. The whole thing is just a really genius piece of work. But there was one thing that was apparent in this album, and that was that Kendrick is just not in a good place and he's at a crossroads in his life. So it just kind of felt like it was him announcing that he needed to leave us for a while and he needed to go work on these feelings. He was saying that he can't really be the savior. He can't do anything for anybody else until he's worked on himself first. But in 2018, Kendrick was also honored with the Pulitzer Prize, which is a group of annual awards given for outstanding achievements, either in journalism, arts, and letters. The Pulitzer Prize is considered to be the highest national honor in the United States for art. This marked the first time that anyone outside of the classical music or jazz genre had ever won this. And if you just look at his face here, like he just couldn't be more happy. And then of course Kendrick worked on the development of the Black Panther soundtrack, which was released in 2018. And this was actually released under TDE, and he got a lot of African artists to actually work with him on this one. But then that was it. Kendrick disappeared. And I think that we're going to leave it there for today, just so I can give you guys a break from listening to me for now. So part 2 is going to be released in a week's time. I will give you guys a little heads up before I do so, but I just want to thank you for watching this to the end and for your support and all the lovely comments that you guys give me. I honestly appreciate hearing from you guys. You're all just really incredible and supportive. Thank you so much. And I will see you guys on the next one.